What's up, everyone? I am just finishing up a little program I've got going on the computer, and I've got three parts to what I'm about to show you. The first part is I've got a school project where I'm supposed to have some advanced machining of 3D surfaces, and the second part is for me to show the instructor that I actually did this on my computer from home, because I'm using a different software than he uses, so he can't verify that I actually did this myself. And three, there's a lot of Vikings out there, Vikings of Utah, that are kind of interested in how I do what I do, and so I thought I'd go ahead and just show this. But this is an axe I've been working on, and you'll notice it's got some interesting features going on here, especially right here, this little piece sticking out of the blade, and then right here where your handle would go. So this axe is a bearded axe that's meant to be made out of wax. And so my project is taking a piece of aluminum, a solid piece of aluminum, and then machining it out and making a cavity, making a mold that I'll be pouring wax into, and then I'll be coating that wax in a ceramic slurry in order to make a casting mold. And so right now I'm making the mold to make the wax, which will be used to make the casting mold for when I go to pour this in steel. So there will be more videos in the future that kind of shows the whole process, but this right here, this feature, the reason why that's there is because that's going to be my inlet for where I go to pour in my hot steel when I'm ready to go and do that. And the reason why this is here is this is going to be a support in my wax mold that's going to allow me to make a hole, and that'll be kind of shown in a later video. So this is my project. It's been really quite difficult because it requires, because it's casting, it requires a lot of different draft angles. You'll notice that right on the top of here there's a V kind of shape, a tapered shape, and these are all angles that are going to help me to be able to take the wax out of the mold once the wax solidifies in that aluminum cavity. If everything were to be straight, no radiuses, and just simple geometry, then it's more likely that wax will get stuck inside of there. So every surface of this thing has been kind of tapered off and rounded to help me get the wax out of the mold. And so what I'm going to show you very briefly is I won't go through how I do this in SolidWorks. SolidWorks is the program that I'm using to draft this. And I can't go really in depth with my other software that I'm going to show you right now because there's just so much detail, but I'll kind of show you what's kind of involved in this. And so I take my axe model and I can bring it into Mastercam, and I can make this kind of mold. And so it's not a very clean looking mold, and it's kind of hard to see the resolution here, but you can see that there's two halves of the axe, and then there's four of these little pinholes right here, and those pinholes are going to be locators for me when I go to machine out this solid plate right here. I'll take and put this in a bandsaw and cut this plate in half, and then I'm going to line up those pinholes to each other to form my mold, and there'll be a cavity inside of there. So that's what this kind of is. And so in order to do this, I've created a little program off to the side here. That's what all of these are. And what my program does is this software recognizes that this is a solid piece of aluminum, and it will take a tool library that I can set up, and I can tell it how to carve out on a CNC machine, on a computer controlled milling machine. It'll tell it how to carve out what the tool path should be. And so I'll just kind of walk through. This is my first tool path, And what this does is this is a roughing toolpath, so I can turn on and off my lines that the tool will follow. So all these little blue lines are little toolpath lines, and the way that this is kind of set up is that I just go under some geometry here, and I can just specify what surfaces. I'll just click on which surfaces I want to machine, so I'll just click, 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 and then I just hit go, and then I open up this other window and set up a bunch of different parameters. So my first toolpath is using a 1/4 inch ball and mill, and it's just this radius tool that it's going to go in there and just kind of carve everything out. And I have my different speeds and feeds. These are different parameters that the machine will run off of. This is basically telling it how fast the machine is going to cut, and then the RPM that it's going to cut at. So there's just like lots of little details in here on how I set this all up. And this software is absolutely amazing. I have total control over the toolpath, what it will look like geometry-wise, and it's how deep that it cuts for every path. And it's a really advanced, you really need to take training and learn the software, but once you learn it, it's absolutely amazing, the different parameters that are on here. So that's my first kind of toolpath. And everything else after that is basically just taking that. This creates a really rough finish, so if I were to generate this, we're going to go ahead and take this and play it. So this, oh, it's freezing up on me. This is going to allow me to kind of see what my toolpath will look like after it's done cutting. So you can see it's kind of really rough still. I don't have any smooth edges anywhere, and all that engraving, it's not there, not yet. And so that's kind of what that looks like. Usually I can turn, that's what I was doing wrong. So this will actually show how that toolpath is going to run. And so it's a really cool representation. You can imagine how this could be inside of my little CNC machine, and this little blue thing is just spinning around real fast, cutting everything out. And so yeah, that's how that is. So that was a really rough one, and then we move on to this finish one. So I'll hide this one, and this finish one, there's two of them actually, one for each half. We'll show you what that kind of looks like. That's going to take those really rough lines and it's going to change it into really smooth lines. So you can see where it's kind of like much slower. It's moving back and forth at the same speed, but it's not cutting out nearly as much area at the same time. Now this is showing that it's cutting solid material, but keep in mind that we already had that previous toolpath. It already had cut out the majority of the bulk here. So it's a real smooth toolpath. Kind of makes those detailed cuts. In fact, if we were to speed that up, we'll go ahead and do that. And you can see where you start to see the fine detail. You start to see the engraving here. And the engraving, it looks nice. It looks kind of nice, but it's rounded, and I didn't want that look. So I've got one more toolpath to kind of come in here and take off that rounded look. And that's this one here. So that's going to come in the very end here, and just finish up and give us all that nice those little details. And let me get that other toolpath out of here. Get that back in here. So this is going to give us that really fine detail. It looks a little jagged here, but that's just because the computer graphics can't keep up with the fineness of the toolpath. So that's kind of how that works. It's this software that allows me to tell it where to cut. And then just down here, I've got some different drills going on here. These drills are set up just to help me to locate the two halves of the mold once they're done. Oh, for some reason it's showing as a really tiny little drill there, but it actually looks like a drill bit, and it's doing it 3 times because I've got a spot drill, which just kind of helps me locate the hole. Then I use a regular drill bit to blast through the plate, and then I use a reamer to get a very precision, very accurate hole that goes through the plate. So there's kind of my program, and if we look at it, I'll fast forward through everything. If we look at it all at once, my little plate's going to look something like this. It's gonna take a little bit to load here. So this is my finished part. Should be pretty slick, pretty smooth, and yeah, that's it. Don't mind those little tiny little jagged. That's just the computer animation, whatever. Not being able to animate very well. So I'll be able to take this and make myself a mold for my wax, for the axe. One more thing, in case you're still wondering what the heck these little grooves are. So what's going to happen is, the way it's going to work is I'm going to make a plug, and the plug is going to fit snugly inside of that little groove right there when my cavity is closed. And so I'll pour in my wax from this little entrance right over here, and after I pour the wax into my little entrance, it's going to seep down in through the mold, and it's going to hit that plug and then go around the plug. And when it comes time to take the mold apart, I'll slide that plug out, and there will be a little hollow hole right there. You know, I think this is going to be much easier to see once I make this part, and I'll be able to show you. But anyways, for now, that's what I got going on.